today's men, because they did not get the paternal nurturing that they needed, have deep feelings of inadequacy about their own manhood. These inadequacies are often manifested around women. That's when they feel them the deepest. They tend to think that the inadequacies are going to be healed by the woman. It's not. The inadequacies arise because of a lack of paternal love. Okay, which means they can be healed in relationship with other men, even in adulthood.
Hence, good to have you on for another chat.
Yeah, great to see you, Paul, and it's great to be here.
Yeah. So you and me, together with Father Michael Butler, have been running a little podcast called As Iron Sharpens Iron over on Ancient Faith. And that's been really fun. And we've just finished off our first season. Congratulations, by the way. That was a really fun project that we did together.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. And we came out with one main conclusion. And so I thought, well, hey, let's try on this YouTube channel to make a video about this one main conclusion. I still don't really understand myself what it gets, what it means, but it's something that you brought back with you from a trip to Mount Athos. And I think the way we're formulating it right now is something along the lines of the foundational, the basic, the most fundamental pattern of reality is patriarchal. So what does that mean? What are we saying when we say that?
Everything has structure. Everything has structure. And St. Ephraim the Syrian says, make me whole, O Lord, make me whole, W-H-O-L-E, that I might understand my place in thy grand design. And every time I go out and speak, I always begin every talk with those three little sentences I quoted from his book, because what he posits there, and they all do, all the ancients do. It's only modernity who thinks that the world is chaotic and we structure it, right? And it's just not true. Okay, then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what is the fundamental nature of reality? So reality, the structure then has a certain life, it has a certain energy. And I'm an Orthodox Christian, and I believe that the energy that gives life its life is the energy of God. That's what I believe. You know, the sun exists in the solar system, right? But the sun gives its energy, and the energy it gives the biosphere its life. And because it has life and it has order, you have this immense variation and beauty. In fact, the light that gives it life also gives light to our eyes so we can see it and appreciate it and even use it for the good of man.
Maybe can I ask, so Christianity has this idea of God the Father, and obviously a father is, if there's a God the Father, then that's the highest patriarchal instance in reality. In what way, can you try and explain, in what way does God the Father exist contra, like, I think everybody can understand, like the sun is like this burning ball of gas. How is God, and you say, okay, well, the sun obviously gives life to the earth and that it transmits energy, but you say God the Father is something similar to that.
Yeah, I do. And I say that the energy of God is love. That's what I think the fundamental energy that keeps all things alive on a spiritual level is, what even created the sun, right? Is love. But love isn't amorphous blob. Love has character. And this love, because it comes from God, who reveals himself as Father, is paternal in nature and paternal in character. Now, when we say paternal, we have an analog, if you will, in the creation, the love of an earthly father, because the love of a father is different than the love of a mother. It is. Now, they're both love, but they have different characters, all right? And so to say that the world is patriarchal is to say at the top of this structure, there is a loving, benevolent God who reveals himself to us. The nature and the character of this love is paternal. So does that mean God's a man? No, because the word father denotes relationship. That's what it does. The earth is not birthed into existence. This is what sets Genesis apart from any other creation narrative that exists. Okay, the other creation narratives, the polytheistic creation narrative, says that the earth, the creation, existence comes out of the stuff and the substance of the gods. If that's the case, then there's no real ontological distance, no real distance of being, no real separation between the creator and the creation. Now, the creator in the polytheistic vision, right? You could call it the pagan vision, whatever you want to call it. Okay. The God, of course, is of a much higher power and greater capability. But the creation itself is still part of the substance of the gods. Now, that is replicated within the creation through the creative prowess of the mother, because we all come from our mothers. Our flesh and our blood is our mother's flesh and blood. The father is the begetter. He's not the birth giver. All right. And you even see this in nature. You know, when the sperm hits the egg, only one sperm cell penetrates the egg, but that sperm cell itself dies. It does not become part of the egg. It dies. The only thing it delivers is the code. A kind of logos is what it delivers. A kind of wisdom, a kind of knowledge that directs the egg not only to replicate, but gives the personality and character of the father, the human father, to the child being born, whether it's male or female. So the child reflects both its mother and its father. But the nature of God's creation, again, we go back to the Genesis narrative, is that he spoke the world into existence. It doesn't come out of the stuff and the substance of the gods. So the Father in heaven begets. He does not give birth. He begets. He speaks it into existence. All right? He speaks it out of love. Things have been revealed to us. We understand things, but there's that ontological separation. So what keeps the world that he begat, that he spoke into existence? All right? What keeps the world that he spoke into existence? I'm going to remove the word begat there. He spoke into existence. Okay, what keeps it alive? What gives it its structure? Well, what gives it its structure is the logos. Okay, is the logos. The logos is revealed through the spoken word. It's the wisdom of God. Now we know that the logos is Christ. Christ enters the world, and he's actually born of a human mother and takes on flesh. It's the whole story of redemption. But the very fact that that could have happened shows us that there's a certain kind of complementarity between the creator and the creation. Okay, it's not an ontological complementary arrangement, but that the creator could enter his creation to save the creation without the creation becoming the creator. Christ enters into the world. So Christ coming into the world shows us that the world itself has structure and order. And this structure and order in some way is related to the creator. It has to be related in terms of logos, of logic, of ordering. St. Maximus the Confessor goes into this in great detail. But he comes out of love. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. So this love has character. And not our first, if you read scripture, it goes all the way back to Eden. So Adam sins, breaks the communion with God, And what happens? Because of his shame, he had no shame before that, but because of his shame, he hides from God the Father. Yet in the narrative, we see God saying, Adam, Adam, where are you? Okay, now, did God know where Adam was? Well, we can say, yeah, of course he was, but that's not, of course he did, but that's not the point of the narrative. The point of the narrative is that he was calling out to Adam. Again, that word, God was speaking. And he goes, where are you, Adam? Where are you? To tell Adam that even though he had sinned and broken the communion with God, that he could still hear his voice and turn to God, and that God would save him even despite his disobedience. And what did he do? The first thing he did was he clothed them with skins of animals to hide his shame. All right. And so we see God, and and the reason
can you bring that down to just a kind of present day example? Because the context that we're facing in society today as well, because I think what we've seen is a massive kind of push through media, through the culture, to reject not just God, but father figures and fatherhood in general. A lot of every image I see these days about fathers and fatherhood, it's always kind of like driving guilt and shame about like why fathers aren't, present enough with their children, or why they, it's like highlighting all the negative images and ideas of fatherhood that one can be. So I think this is something that's so what you're saying though is that the story in from Adam and Eve, from Genesis, is actually the exact same pattern of this the relationship between the father and the son, and illustrating that.
Yeah. Okay, so your child does something. Okay, your child does something. You can either shame that child or you can strengthen that child. Okay, in a very practical way. Your brother does something that is wrong and shameful, and he sees it. Do you humiliate him, or do you cover his sin? You cover his sin. You cover his sin. And so there's a benevolence implied here. And that benevolence exists because as I tell that story, everybody who hears it in their heart, it resonates. You hold up your brother. You don't hold him to public ridicule. Okay, there's a benevolence here, a benevolent love. I don't know if I'm answering your question here, Paul.
Yeah. Well, what I'm also getting is that there's this kind of relationship between God the Father and mankind. Their biological father and a son, and then also brothers that can play a fatherly role for each other somehow.
Well, I contend that every time a brother helps a brother, he's fathering the brother. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, he's fathering the brother, because the love between two brothers is fundamentally a paternal love, not a maternal. It's a paternal love. Mm-hmm. So it's really good for men to have brothers, because when the man that needs the help, he will receive the paternal help that he needs to become more of a man from his brother, because that's when men love men, the nature of the love is paternal.
Yeah. And then you said two different things. You said like you cover his sin, but you're also not like, I kind of see the mother, she's always the one who's like accommodating, and she's the one who says like, oh, you're perfect just the way you are, kind of thing, where the father still holds his brother or his son to a higher standard, right? He's not kind of like, he's bringing a closer contact to reality, but there's also an aspect that he does that in a soft and gentle way of nourishing and cherishing the child. Is that correctly understood?
Yeah. Yes. And see, and that points to the different, again, means of creativity. Okay. The mother creates with her body. Okay. The child, you can see this if any man who has children, and they see that the attachment of the mother to the child is much different than the father to the child. Because in the mother's consciousness, the child is always seen as an extension of her, which it is. It comes out of her body. Okay. And so the mother protects and nurtures the child in a way that it needs to be protected and nurtured. This is why you want a two-parent family, right? Ideally. And yet the father's love is so that the child might be strengthened, especially in the case of a son. And it's because the father understands natively that the man creates through his hands, by building, by solving problems, by confronting the enemy, that type of thing. That's what a man does. A man does not create he creates with his body, but not from his body. Mm-hmm. All right. And that's why also the woman needs the man so that she can fulfill her role as a woman, especially with the child, properly. Mm-hmm. So the man builds the home. The man turns the home into a fortress, okay, that protects it from any threat from the outside, that frees the woman to nurture the child so that the child knows it too is indeed loved. Mm-hmm. But it really matters. It really matters with boys and young men. It really matters, because how's the boy going to learn how to be a man if he doesn't have a man to teach him? Okay, and again we go to the character of manly love, which is necessarily paternal.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing is it's also like it's a personal experience of a relationship of love that's not something you can get from watching a television program or from a YouTube video or something like that. Like, it needs to be a personal relationship between a father and a son, roles, where one experiences the reception and the giving of love in order to do that. It's not an abstract idea that you can read in a book either. It's a personal experience to learn this thing of becoming a man.
The father has to pour his love into the child, and especially we're talking about manhood here, especially into the boy. The boy has to feel the father's love. He has to feel the father, has to smell the father, has to see the father, has to feel the strong arms holding him and hugging him, has to hear, "I love you, son." He has to hear that. That will nourish his soul. That will give him confidence. That will strengthen his character, right? So even when the father has to reprimand the boy, and boys need a lot of reprimanding, right? The son still doesn't lose his self-confidence. He still grows into a strong sense of self and self-identity because he knows it comes from love, even if he doesn't like it.
Yeah.
It's really important.
I think this is maybe taking it a step deeper and more challenging when you talk about the reprimanding, because we know from reading the book of Proverbs that we say the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Mm-hmm. And I can also see that sometimes I get angry with my family, with my wife, with my son. Sometimes I probably express that anger in an uncontrolled and emotional way.
Yep.
But there are many times actually when I fully aware of, noticing my anger, noticing the action that's happening, am able to channel that anger into what you could call a stern reprimand. And I see that sometimes it's painful when it's received, but I also think, and I don't think I do it perfectly, but I also think that the consequences of not doing that would be far worse. For example, a child, my son, I have a 2.5-year-old son who, needs to learn how to respect his mother and obey her and not be constantly fighting with her or nagging with her or, disobeying her as well, like blatantly or something like that. Right. So there's an aspect where I've realized, like, my son needs to fear me as well, just a little bit. Like, there isn't that same, him and his mom, they have like a really intimate closeness a lot of the time with each other. And I don't have that same kind of intimacy with him as that his mother has.
Yes. Yeah. But that'll change when he becomes 12, 13, 14. He's going to bond with you a lot more as he enters puberty. Yeah. Okay. And that's when he needs to feel your masculine strength in order for him to become a strong man ultimately. Here's another takeaway. I got this when I went to Athos. That that today's men, because they did not get the paternal nurturing that they needed, have deep feelings of inadequacy about their own manhood. These inadequacies are often manifested around women. That's when they feel them the deepest. They tend to think that the inadequacies are going to be healed by the woman. It's not. The inadequacies arise because of a lack of paternal love. Okay, which means they can be healed in relationship with other men, even in adulthood. But what they do in order to make up for these inadequacies, they present what I call the false self. And the false self is always the inverse of the inadequacy. Mm-hmm. The problem with that is that if you live in the false sense, which is really a form of pride, you automatically cut yourself off from the possibility of experiencing that brotherly paternal love. You become isolated. All right. And so the relationships between men as they should grow never really do. Mm. And about the only thing that can change this is when the man who is struggling with this begins to suffer. Okay. And he begins to see that the false self isn't sufficient for healing what needs to be healed. Now, what heals it when he enters in communion with another man, okay, when he experiences the paternal love that that will give him the self-confidence. Mm-hmm. The love itself becomes the agent of healing. Mm-hmm. So where do these inadequacies come from? You know, guys go to psychotherapy and stuff like that. It can't heal it. It can't heal it. They come from the fact that the love the boy needed to grow in self-confidence and self-awareness and to learn how to be a man in the world was lacking in his life. Okay, so the healing then, and it can heal. I've seen it over and over again. The healing then comes if he drops the false self, right, and opens himself up to the love of another man. And that's what brotherhood is all about. That's what spiritual fatherhood and spiritual sonship is all about. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. And I see it. I have spiritual sons, right? And to see them like come into their own, and this is the reward for the father, whether it's a spiritual son or a biological son, right? This is the reward for the father. There's no greater joy than a father has when he sees his son become who he is, to discover who God created him to be and start actualizing it. You become proud of your son.
It's so true what you say about how men are looking for healing their feelings of inadequacy with women. There's so many men out there that think that their value as a man is either how many women will go to bed with them, or how many orgasms they can give to a woman, or what their proficiency is in pleasuring a woman or something like that. And it's just like a bottomless hole that guys are digging themselves into a lot of the time. That unfortunately the culture is really supporting, so you can continue down that road for a very, very long time. But I think more and more guys are realizing like it's just not it's not a way forward. And so when you were talking, I realized this false self, can that be that is there, would you say this, maybe there's more, but I already see two, like there's like kind of the macho guy and then there's the nice guy, and it's really interesting saying that it's the opposite of what's actually underneath.
See, it's the anguish of not knowing a father's love. Mm-hmm. That's the bottom line. Mm-hmm. Okay? It's the anguish of not knowing a father's love, because men learn how to become a man from other men. Okay? And it has to be primarily the father. But more and more, men don't have that experience. And so they grow up feeling ill-equipped. Okay, they feel inadequate. They feel all sorts of deficiencies, and there are very few voices out there telling them how to heal. Okay, there's a lot of voices out there telling them how to behave, and usually Usually, you know, they're not helpful at all, and very often they're destructive.
Normally they're kind of like the hysterical mom nagging types of voices that like just saying like, oh, you're a bad boy, you're a bad boy, you're a bad boy kind of thing, right? That's
that's really what it is.
Scandinavia, that's what you read. It's like how bad and evil and toxic men are and how terrible they all are and how all the things that are wrong with men. And it's not constructive. Like everybody can do this. It's a very cheap and easy way to get airtime. It's just to talk about how terrible and bad men are.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, it is. And we just got to start saying no to this stuff. Mm-hmm. We've just got to tell men, okay, this is how you heal, guys. This is what you were created for. This is how you heal. Forget the rest. Just forget the rest. At best, it's noise. At worst, it's diabolical.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So a lot of this is really about what I hear is like, you know, you say men create with our hands. So what we're teaching men is skills, but and so it's about just like, you know, the skills of having a life, of putting together a life, a family, of all these kinds of things. There's also another aspect of it that I don't know if it's included or related to that or if it's something separate, but I would say it's maybe the priestly role. It's the imparting of the logos. It's what the father does, of course, when he creates the life by, you know, giving, as you said, the seed, the information that then enters into the egg. But then the father, there's something about, and maybe we'll finish off with this, but I think what we tried to say is like, virtue is patriarchal as well. Like there's something about like, and I think you guys also said it, like, we've noticed that churches that start introducing female priests, these are often the churches that start kind of, you know, very quickly sliding off into, you know, totally losing all kind of doctrinal integrity in actually teaching, you know, the original teachings that are found in the Bible and of Christ, and going off into, you know, all kinds of other ideologies as well. So well, they also about that role of fatherhood.
You could say the feminists are they're going to cut off my head, but I don't really care. Okay. Men are the logos, women are the earth. Okay. Men are the logos.
Like Sky Father, Mother Earth, like that's everybody, even the pagans do that, right?
but yeah, they do. And it's a very basic image, but it's really true. It's really true. The child is born from the body of the mother. Okay. But it's the man that shapes the world around the woman for the nurturance of the child. That's what the man does. The man applies his hands and really the logic of his own mind, the development of his own skills, okay, to build the house and protect and nurture the woman and the child. Okay. Now, it's been turned, well, it really hasn't been turned upside down in our culture. It's that basic model has been attacked and in large areas destroyed. You don't see a new culture emerging. You don't see a more equitable culture emerging. You don't see a more ordered culture emerging. What you see is an increasing chaos, and that the children, as they grow up, okay, they're disordered. They're chaotic inside. They're not bad. They're not evil. But they did not have the structure. Here we go back to structure necessary for a sound life. The structure is key, and love within that structure it's the breath of life. It creates order. It gives the child a chance. It's interesting, you know, that in areas where the family has fallen apart, young men, they form gangs. You see it with, you know, in our inner cities in America. You see it in Mexico, the Mexican gangs, right? What are they doing? They're trying to recreate a semblance of patriarchy, because patriarchy is it's just native to existence. It is the dominant and primordial structure. And it's because God is Father. His manner of relating to his creation is replicated in the family of the Father's manner, in the creation of the Father's manner of taking care of the family.
Yeah.
Pater familias, they
Absolutely.
call that.
I mean, here in Denmark, we have a health sector as well as the priestly profession have been largely taken over by women. And I very regularly meet female doctors and female priests who tell me like, oh, we so much need some more male doctors and male priests where I work because it just degrades into a hen house if it's only females. This is from, these female women who say like, it's like, but as soon as there's one guy there, then he can create that stability, and then there's a natural hierarchy that then emerges, right? Women, they naturally have a circular way of relating to each other, and this is what they do well. This is how they, and so it's like women. It's not like women can't relate in hierarchy, but they just don't. It's not natural to them. Whereas when a man comes in, then he kind of can create that order, and everybody relaxes when it happens.
Yeah, everybody's relieved. Yeah.
And that's what's lacking in families today. Is I see men who are told that they should not lead their family. They're not able to lead their family. It's a perpetuation of an evil, bad system if they're leading their family. And so they say, well, then I step back and I won't leave my family. And what I see is then families suffering greatly because of that. And so I think more and more men are realizing that there's a need for them to step up and step into leadership, and to do that well, because the demands on men today are obviously far higher. You can't. There's always a learning curve when you're learning to lead. You need to. Leadership is about often sacrificing yourself, of giving up yourself, of learning to love, and it takes time to learn that. And normally any person will be clumsy in their first steps of doing that, and it's learning by doing, right? And yeah, there's less space for that today, but there's no other option. I think the option is a life of complete irrelevance and collapse, or to do that hero's journey towards leading as a man.
It's so integral to the structure of reality, to the structure of creation, that if we rebel against it, you do violence to reality. You do violence to it. You can't tear down what is given and expect something better to rise from the ashes. The only thing you're going to have is ruin. We see that in America. We have a tremendous. Our cities are collapsing because of the collapse of the family. And there is the only thing that can step into it is the long arm of the state. But the state is, number one, horribly inefficient. And number two, it doesn't have a heart. It only functions, right? And so what happens then is that the man develops a dependency. He doesn't develop the skills to really survive and make and create and do. He develops a dependency. The dependency just robs him of all initiative and character and hope, and he ends up in despair. And the end result is just numbing the pain through drugs, and all this stuff that people fall into. So that's what happens. So those who attack the patriarchy so viciously, right? The ideologues, they attack the very structure of creation, the structure of reality, and an attack on the structure of creation is ultimately an attack on God. That's what it is. And so when it gets to be really, really bad, okay, you can say, and it's true, that some of this stuff is demonically inspired. And you know who saw that first in modernity? Dostoevsky, in the book The Demons. It's a little village, an ideology comes in, and the village actually disintegrates. And there was a real interesting point he makes. This is 200 years ago, whatever it was, right? He says that the revolutionary is often the offspring of a weak father. That's what he observed. He said the revolutionary is often the offspring, the son of a weak father, a son who gave up his the father who gave up his masculinity. Now, when I look at the Antifa problem that we're having here in America, kind of rent-a-rioter, right? And I look at these guys closely. They're rent-a-rioters. You know, it's ideological. But I look at these guys closely. They're all in their 30s and they're all man boys. They're all men, okay, who are starting to feel the regret of extending a childhood into their 30s, right? And this comes along and they're going to save the world. It's an adolescent hero story that has not been tempered by the adult experiences of real life. There's no maturity, there's no sobriety here at all. And they're very captive. They become the revolutionaries because they are seduced by the ideology, and they just don't think very well. But that's because they haven't matured as men. They become dangerous, is what happens.
Great. Thank you for the hints. I think that was a great taster of that topic. And then I think it's ancientfaith.com/podcast/iron is our podcast.
Yeah.
I'll put the link in here if people are interested. We'll be starting the next episode sometime after Easter, I guess, or the next season, and really exploring this topic in over 14 episodes or something like that. So I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been fun. And I'm going to mention one more thing for people that are watching this in America. Then we are going to be meeting each other in the flesh for the second time, together with Father Michael as well, and hopefully I think we have a space for 140 guys that we're all going to be gathering in Livonia, Michigan, in the first weekend of October for a men's gathering, which right now we're titling Beloved Sons. And that's going to be a real opportunity for meeting other men who are aware of these same problems and working together to create the structures that are lifting men out of a lack of fatherhood. And first of all, we need to do this with each other. That's the approach that we're taking.
Yeah, that's how we're going to do it, Paul. Exactly what you described. Guys, quit living a life of resignation and defeat. Just stop it, okay? And establish brotherhood, and we're going to help you do that.
Yeah. No more lone wolves. Like the lone wolf thing doesn't work. Like we need each other. That's what we do. We need each other. Good. Thanks for that.
Okay. Thanks, Paul.